Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lara and today I'm going to be talking about sci-fi and fantasy series that booktube loves, and I'm just going to give my opinion on them. It's going to be a casual chat. Some of these series that I'm going to talk about I've talked about before on my channel, and I've talked about with some of you before on various different social media channels. I thought it would just be quite fun to revisit some of the great hits of booktube and whether I agree whether they should be hits or not. There won't be any spoilers or anything like that. I'll keep it pretty straightforward. But yeah, I think with that in mind, let's jump into the video. So the first one that we're going to talk about is Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. This series, I think more so than any other series, seems to be just like the golden child. And the amount of people, booktubers, readers, reviewers, whatever, like the amount of people that love this series so much genuinely had me concerned for this part of society, like genuinely. I personally still don't see, now that it's been, quite a while since I read the first book and then part of the second book. It's been a while now, so I can kind of maybe be a bit more objective about it, because after I finished reading the first, book and a half, naturally I had very strong opinions about it because I just couldn't believe that so many people were raving about that series so much. Because in my opinion, and obviously this is always my own opinion, and if you disagree, that's completely fine. We can have a respectful conversation about it. But my very subjective opinion about it is that the writing is just not very good. The characters were so one note. Nothing felt kind of intriguing about them. Like, as an example, Hilo, one of the worst characters that I've ever read. Like a character type that in theory I love. The kind of macho man who is kind of still learning the ropes and is, has a lot of responsibility thrust upon him. But yet he's just like this edgy edgelord that I just didn't care about. And the way he was introduced into the book was so disgusting. If you want to learn more about what I said about that, you can watch my review because I do talk about it in a bit more detail. But the characters were just so unlikable, and not in a way where it's like, yeah, they're morally grey, so they are meant to be unlikable. I love morally grey characters. I talk about morally grey characters all the time. And so in theory should be, again, characters that I love, but they were just so unlikable in the sense that I couldn't get behind their motivations. I couldn't get behind them as people. They were so just bland. They didn't have personalities. This is still one of those ones that I just don't get it. I don't get it. There were ones on this list that, even though I didn't like the series, I can understand why other people liked it. This is probably the only one on this list that I just still don't understand why people love it so much. Like, the writing is so janky, so much context dumping, so much info dumping all over the book. It's just really unpleasant to read. Very, 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 very slow. I don't mind slow books. Some of my favorite books are so slow. And yeah, it's just, I think it was partly because of the writing style and also the character types. It was horrible. It was a mess. And I still to this day question a lot of the people who love this series so much. And why? I still haven't had a compelling argument as to why people think this series is so well written. I just don't. I did read a summary of the final book to get a sense of whether I was missing out on anything, and I'm so glad I didn't waste my time because I'd already predicted the ending in the first book. And this was prior to me even knowing anything about the final book, right? So I'm just glad I didn't waste my time, money, and energy reading on with that series, because it is, in my opinion, abysmal. Greenbone haters, please comment down below, because I'm always trying to search for you folks. Always trying to search for you folks. Next is another one that I liked when I first read it, and then I realised I don't like the series. I don't get why it's so overhyped, and that is the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. Book one was okay. I quite enjoyed it, and I think the reason why I enjoyed it is because it was basically just Hunger Games 2.0, and I love Hunger Games. I want to reread that series soon. Probably unlikely this year because I've got too many of the things that I need to get through first, but probably next year I'm going to do a reread of it because I read it when I was a teenager and I loved it. Katniss Everdeen, one of the best female characters that I've ever read. And I just think the thematic work was explored in a way that is still incredibly relevant. It's just such a well done series. Red Rising, I think I try not to get taken in by hype, and I definitely don't now, but I think this was near to like the start of my channel, and so I was really kind of getting into the community. I would say I'm pretty separate from the community now. Like I still obviously speak to quite a few booktubers. I still do like collaboration videos now and then, but like I'm pretty separate in the sense that I don't really go on other people's channels. I don't really invite people to my channel, mainly due to time constraints, but also because I think my tastes in general are like vastly different to a lot of what popular booktubers read. I tend to read a lot of underrated stuff as well, whereas I think a lot of booktubers review popular stuff. I get why they do it. It gets views. The videos that I have the most views on are of books that are extremely popular. So I get it why they do that. I'm not generally interested in a lot of the stuff that is popular, even though there is some stuff that I have enjoyed in the past, like Will of the Many is a really good example. Everybody was talking about it on BookTube. Everybody loved it. And that is like one rare instance where I actually agree with people. But Red Rising, I think I don't think it really presented a fresh or a new take on what is a very popular kind of story arc, or like a lot of the same tropes that I think are used in a lot of sci-fi and dystopian fiction, right? I don't think you have to, but I think when you're just doing the same old stuff, like I just don't really get it. There is also a trope that is used in this book, and I will spoil this slightly, so skip ahead 10 seconds. The resurrection trope is the worst trope in history because it is cheap. It is a cheap tactic and I hate it. And that actually, I think, was the point at which I realized this series was grossly overrated and people needed to get a reality check because it's just so average. Like, it's an average series. I wouldn't say it's bad. Like, I want to make it very clear. I don't think this is a badly written series like Jade City or Greenbone Saga. Like, I think I personally think that is an objectively poorly written series. But this series, I think, is okay. Like, I don't think his writing is particularly inspiring, but it gets the point across, which is sometimes what you want. And I think given that this is a very pacey series, that's also what you need. But there are certain tropes that I think are so overused that I think it would have been nice to have just had like a slightly different approach, and that's just not explored. A lot of these characters are also very one-dimensional and quite boring. The only character that I actually quite liked was the main character, thankfully, because he's the main POV for the first couple of books. But then we start to get introductions to other characters. Darrow becomes less important, and the problem is that those other characters are bland and boring and I don't care about. So I actually stopped reading the series partway through book 5 because I just don't care. I'm criticizing him because I think his books are like very average, and I'm criticizing the BookTube community because BookTube plays a very important role in giving voices to authors and like putting them on the map, right? And I just think I think so many people put so much energy into talking about this series that like, and I get it, like if you love a series, you love it, and I'm not criticizing people for loving what they love, but I do find it really funny that people put so much energy into the most average series ever when there's so much more incredible fiction that, especially like science fiction, that does a better job of talking about these themes, that has interesting characters, an interesting take, and like nobody talks about them or reads them or has even heard of them. I'll keep trying my best, but I'm one person and I'm a tiny little booktuber with 2,000 subscribers. I'm grateful for every single one of you, and I'm so glad that we have this tiny little bit of YouTube. But the point is that like my reach is not the reach of some of the really huge booktubers, right? And they're just recommending the same old tired shit. And I'm bored of it. That's why I stopped watching BookTube. Anyway, rant over. I was meant to be limiting myself to 3 to 4 minutes for each one, and that is not happening. The next one I'm going to talk about is a positive one, and that is Will of the Many by James Islington. Oh my gosh, this book is so good. It's paced so well. The characters are so good. Again, another like sci-fi fantasy series that I think covers a lot of the same themes as Red Rising. You know, there's revolution, there's a kind of school academic kind of aspect to it. There's like not really a competition. Well, I guess there is a competition aspect to it. Yeah, of course there is. Like the last third of the book is a literal competition. So they have like a lot of parallels, but like it's done so well. Like the writing, I wouldn't say is exceptional, but it's good. it gets the point across. I think the characters are very interesting. They all have interesting backstories. We really get a sense of like who they are, where they're going, what they're doing, you know, where they could possibly end up. And I just don't think we get that in Red Rising, but we definitely get that in Will of the Many. And bear in mind, Will of the Many is only one book at the moment. So the fact that we've managed to get all of that in one book compared to 5 books of Red Rising is pretty astonishing, in my opinion. Will of the Many also, I think, approaches the themes in a really great way, and in a way that I wouldn't say is completely new, but does it in a slightly fresher way than, say, Red Rising. I think this is one of those series that I'm quite thankful to BookTube. I would say I was more thankful to my Patreons, actually, for talking about this book, because one or two of them had read this and really loved it, and I thought, okay, we all have pretty similar taste here, so I'll give it a go. But I think it first came onto my radar as a result of people talking about it so much. This is one of those very rare instances where the community was definitely right. The next one I'm going to talk about is First Law. Now, First Law is interesting because I didn't read First Law because of BookTube. I came across First Law completely on accident. This was during the pandemic. I was looking for some new fantasy books to read. I did a whole bunch of research. I think I read like an article, like it was like an actual news article about Joe Abercrombie and like his inspirations and things like that. And I thought, okay, this guy's, you know, inspirations are like stuff that I like and like media that I've consumed. Like his taste in TV shows is exactly the same as my own taste, so we consume a lot of the same media. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. I bought the trilogy and I read the trilogy in like 5 days. That's how addicted I was to that series. I then looked for reviews of the First Law trilogy, and then that's how I realized, oh, this is actually quite a popular series. It's not like, at least when I read it, it wasn't super popular. It's a lot more popular now, but I think just generally, I think BookTube currently has got it right as it relates to First Law. Like, it is some of the best grimdark you will ever read. It's just some of the best fantasy you will ever read. The characters are all so well done. Very much a dark world, but yet there's these really great light moments, really amazing humor that counteracts that darkness. I personally didn't find it super dark, but I can totally see why other people might, because my threshold for that sort of stuff is probably quite a bit higher than the average person. But it just hits all the notes. It hits all the notes. The writing is just phenomenal. Like, just everything just works. Like, perfect trilogy, in my opinion. After I read it, seeing everybody on BookTube loving it, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm not the only one that thinks this series is amazing, and I think BookTube definitely got that right. The next one I'm going to talk about is Wheel of Time, and this is a series that I read the first 2 books of, and then I stopped reading it and I ended up selling all my copies. I had the first 6 books in paperback, like the really beautiful floppy ones. This is one where I understand why people love it, because I think for a lot of people it's very, like, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like, it reminds them of their childhood, maybe when they read it when they were younger. It's got a lot of memory attached to it, and it's just classic, good old-fashioned fantasy, I think. And sometimes that's what you want. Sometimes there is a place for that. And while that's not always my favourite thing to read, as evidenced by the fact that I didn't like this series, I get why other people like it. It's funny because, again, I'd never heard of Wheel of Time. Like, I bought it on a whim because I was looking for series similar to Lord of the Rings, and this is the one that comes up most. I read the first 2 books, liked aspects of it, didn't like certain characters though, and then I had a feeling that it was going to be very predictable, and then I just thought, you know what, I'm going to look at some people talking about it, like spoilers, and I'm so glad that I didn't stick with it, because a lot of the things that I had predicted actually came true, and I just think that payoff wouldn't have been worth it. I think I would have been very frustrated. And while I get why people love the series so much and they have that kind of emotional attachment to it, I just think it's very convoluted, it's very wordy. The world building is beautiful, but in some places it's very unnecessary. Like, it's just very over the top, and I think, you know, it definitely needed an editor to like half the size of the books, in my opinion. All right, we have 2 more. The next one is one that I loved at the time that I read it, but upon reflection, you know, 2 years later, however many years it's been, I think that, again, this is one of those rare instances where I got into hype. Again, this was at the start of my BookTube journey. It was when I was really getting involved in the community, and so I really got bought into the hype of this series. But as I said, upon reflection, I really don't think it's that great, and that is The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. Now, I'm really excited to read his latest series because I think a lot of the characters are, you know, older characters, adult characters, and I've heard some really great things about the thematic work explored in that series. The Fifth Villain of the Fallen was his debut series, I believe. It's a quartet, and again, it's quite like a old school fantasy series, I think, in the sense that it has a lot of the same tropes. There's coming of age tale, there's found family, you know, there's a lot of the kind of tropes that you would expect in an old school fantasy series, in my opinion. But it was just, I think the writing was okay, like it was very average, but I think the way that people used to talk about it was like it was the next, you know, Tolkien or something, which it absolutely is not. Like, I think it did a decent enough job of making you really like the characters because some of the characters were pretty well done. But again, it was one of those series that I think was kind of a victim of its own hype, in the sense that everybody was talking about it, but I don't think anybody was really questioning whether this was actually like a really, really good piece of fiction. There's a whole conversation around like what makes a piece of fiction good. Like, is it people talking about it? Is it the writing? And obviously all these things are subjective, right? You can have a commercially successful book, but in my opinion, you can also have an objectively poorly written book, like the one that I'm going to talk about next, that loads of people love. But does that mean that it's good? I don't, like, not necessarily, right? Popular books aren't always good books, as evidenced by some of the series that I've talked about on this list. I think like it was very average. It was very like meh. And whilst I understand that, you know, a lot of people were really excited about, you know, certain scenes, like some of the war scenes were quite good, I just think overall it was just very like, okay, like this is great, in the sense that if you are a beginner to fantasy, like this is probably quite a good place to start because it introduces you to a lot of the most common tropes. But at the same time, I don't think it really adds anything new to the genre. I don't think it really adds anything new to the conversation around like what is fantasy, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just I don't think it necessarily deserved the level of hype that it got. And I think a lot of people still talk about that series like it's the best thing that's been ever written. And I really just don't think that's the case. So I'm very lukewarm on this one. Like, I don't think it's a bad series necessarily. I don't think it's poorly written even. I just think it's very, very average. And I think a lot of people hype it up for certain reasons that aren't necessarily a reflection of it being a good book or a good series. The last one that I'm going to talk about is not going to be a surprise to anybody, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca, whatever her surname is. This is a series that a lot of people love, and, you know, I've probably done about 3 hours talking about Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, which is the second book. And this to me, like I've always said, you know, and I think a lot of people agree with this, reading is subjective. I just think this is an objectively badly written series. There are inconsistencies, there are plot holes, the characters are really stupid. You know, they're supposed to be like in their mid-20s and they talk like 12-year-olds. They're trying to be really edgy, and yet they just come across as like teenagers just trying to be like really, you know, cool, and it's like you're really not. And the dragons are really dumb, even though they're supposed to be really intelligent, and yet they act and do really stupid things. What else? Like, there's just like so many inaccuracies in the book. Like, the author will write one thing in one chapter and then completely contradict herself, either in the same chapter or later on in the book or the next book. Like, it's so funny how poorly plotted this series is. There are also certain things about the world that just don't even make sense. Like, why is it that rebels are allowed to be in the army? Why? Why would you have a bunch of people who hate you in your army? Like, it makes no sense. It literally makes no sense. It's so stupid. Like, it's literally the dumbest series ever written. And I get people want popcorn fiction, but you can also have good popcorn fiction. You can have books that are very addictive, but that are also well written. This is just like, I think a lot of people really need to like get a reality check, because you can say that you had fun with it and call it poorly written. Like, I'm totally fine with people saying that. People saying that it's well written though really need to like get their head checked. No hate, of course, but like it genuinely does make me question whether you're like, you're okay. Like there's a friend of mine who loves this series, but we had a conversation about it a few weeks ago, and she said, I totally get that it's bad. Like, it's badly written, and you're right, there's inaccurate. I just thought to myself, thank goodness, otherwise I might have ended this friendship. I'm joking. I don't think I would do that over a book. But there are like people who genuinely say this series is well written, and I just genuinely think there is something wrong with you if you think that. But yeah, another series that just does not deserve the hype, does not deserve the level of praise that it's getting, because it is objectively bad, in my opinion. It's funny to say something is objectively bad and then say in my opinion, but it is what it is. So there we have it. Those are just a couple of popular series that I think that I thought would be worth kind of revisiting now that I've sat on those series for a while. I've read, you know, a number of the books in each of those series. I will do another part to this because there are more series that deserve to be on this list and to be discussed. But let me know down below if any of these series also, you know, met your expectations or didn't meet your expectations. If there are any other series as well that kind of fall into this bucket of, you know, booktube famous but not necessarily deserving the hype, let me know down below, because I think this is quite a fun conversation to have. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next video, folks. Thanks for watching, stay safe, take care, and I will see you very soon. Bye.